everyone, I am back for week 3 of Evergreen Mystery Sew Along that Fat Quarter Shop is hosting. I have all my pieces cut out and they are ready to go, so we are going to get right into it. So the first thing that I need to do is make some square and a square. We're going to need 6 square and a square in total. So we're going to take fabrics H and fabrics E, and they are going to go on fabrics F, and that is going to make our baubles, I believe is what they call it. I'm guessing it's supposed to be like little ornaments hanging from the tree. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to draw a diagonal line on the back of all of these little ones. This is a non-directional print, so it doesn't really matter which way I do it, but I did choose a stripy one for my accent fabric. So I am going to have to be a little bit more careful here because I want my stripes all going the same way. So before I draw any lines, I'm going to fold it in half and just kind of audition it to see which way I want it to go. And then that way I know where to draw my line, and I'm going to do each square individually because I want all my lines going the same direction. And because I did mess up on week 2s and some of my lines aren't going the right direction, I do want to be extra careful here and make sure that I do it. So basically I would sew those 2 down, and then I would take my next one and then I would have to fold it to make sure that my stripes are going the same way. But I don't want to do this all at once. I'm going to do just half and then do the other half because like I said, I don't want to screw it up again and I want to take my time. Sometimes going slower pays off in the end. You do get a better result. And for the baubles, you will have 2 of each print, and then you're going to do half of them with the accent fabric and half of them with the tree fabric. And since the tree fabric is non-directional, those I can just get them all ready. And I'm just going to lay the little squares on there, take them over to the sewing machine, and sew along that line. And then once I've sewn along the line, I would trim it and then sew the other 2 corners on. So I'm just going to get these all ready and go sew them down, and then I will come back and show you the next step. All right, I have finished sewing on 2 of the little squares for all of them, for the little sew and flips. Before I trim anything or press anything, I am going to double check that I sewed everything correctly because I would like to fix it here. It would be a lot easier to fix it here if I made a mistake. But I did do them all right, so all I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be taking my little ruler and then just line my 1/4 inch line up with a stitch line and using my rotary cutter to cut it because you want a 1/4 inch seam there. You could just use your scissors and eyeball it. It doesn't have to be 100% perfect, but I'm just going to do it like this. And honestly, making these little square and a squares doing the sew and flips was the longest part of this quilt. It was the hardest part, but definitely not difficult. I believe it's totally beginner friendly if you're interested in doing it. So once we have those all trimmed up and ready to go, we are ready to do the last corners. So again, this one's non-directional, so it doesn't really matter. I can just lay them on there, head over to the sewing machine and sew that down. But my stripy ones, again, I have to be very careful in doing them one at a time. So again, I will be taking my time and auditioning everything before I draw any lines around there or anything like that. So I'll just start with one and then I will fold my little square in half again and making sure that I put it in the correct corner so that I have my lines all going the same way because here I have them all going up and down. And once I know exactly where I want it to go, I'm just going to use my ruler and my heat erase pen to draw a line. You could really use any marking tool here that you would like. It's in the wrong side of the fabric, so nothing to worry about. And these I will clip in place because I just don't want them to move and I don't want it to get mixed up. And again, I was double checking before I committed to that corner because I want to make sure that I do this right. And then I'm just going to repeat that same process with all my other corners and clip them in place and head over to the sewing machine and sew them down. So I've sewn them down and now I'm just going to make sure that everything's lining up nicely, and then I'm going to take my ruler and trim everything again. I'm feeling a little bit weird sewing Christmas stuff in July, but well, if you want to get it done, I guess you gotta get a head start on your Christmas sewing. Now that we've made all of our square and squares, and we're going to look at our pattern, and it tells you exactly what you need to square it up to. And this is a very important step, so I would highly recommend that you do that. It's just going to make everything else look nicer and neater later on. So I will be squaring these all up before I move on to the next step. And one thing when you do when you're squaring them up, you want to make sure that you don't lose your 1/4 inch seam allowance there, because if you do, you will lose your points later on. And I don't know if anybody has seen what I have seen yet in one of my little bubble blocks here, but I've seen it and I cannot unsee it. Let me know if you see it before I tell you what it is. I'll tell you at the end of the video. And if I had noticed it at this point, I probably would have changed it, but I didn't see it until I finished it. But anyway, so now we're going to take fabric C and we're going to sew them together with one of our tree baubles, I'm guessing. The pattern shows you exactly how to put them, and this is where I am going to do some moving around just to try to get a nice cohesive look. And I really wish I would have gone with a darker color for all my baubles because I feel like the grays are blending in. But maybe I'll do some hand quilting on there just to make them pop a bit more. So before I commit and sew these all together, I am going to lay out the accent portion as well. That way I can kind of see how I want to lay my baubles so that there's no 2 of the same prints lined like right beside each other. Because like right now, the way I have it laid out, those gray feather pieces would be too close together in my opinion. And here again, I need to make sure that I have all my stripes going the same way. So here I'm just going to shuffle my pieces around until I get a look that I like, and then I'm going to sew these all together. And I'm just going to lay them together the way I want to sew them together and then secure them with some clips and head over to the sewing machine. I'll line them up properly once I'm there and just right before I want to sew them. And I just took all three of my strip units to my sewing machine. Everything's kind of somewhat clipped. And I'm just taking the clip off and then just lining everything up and trying to make sure that I'm not losing any of my points here. But that sometimes does happen, and I was actually very happy with the results I had on these. My squares aren't always perfect, and I thought these turned out very well. Once I have my strips cut out, then I'm just going to lay them right sides together and sew them together. And if you follow the pressing directions that are on the pattern, everything should nest properly here. And if your seams are nesting properly, this will just help everything lay a lot flatter. So I always try to nest my seams wherever I can. Okay, so I've pinned these two and I'm going to go to the sewing machine and then I'm going to sew that down. And once I've sewn those two together, I'm just going to sew this one on there and then we will move on to the next step. And then just like on week 1 and week 2, we need to do a sew and flip on this big corner here. So I have those squares all cut out and ready. I already drew my lines on there. So I'm just going to pin those in place and sew right along the line. But these I'm going to make sure that I pin them properly because I don't want this to shift around. On week 2, I didn't pin properly and it was a little wonky, but I did make it work. So then we're just going to trim off at a 1/4 inch from our stitch line again. Same thing as the week 1 and week 2. And I believe there are 5 weeks in total for this sew along. So make sure that you like and subscribe. And if you want to see what this is going to end up looking like, and my daughter is getting a little excited in the other room. Well, we're almost done with today's video anyway. So down we're going to take fabrics A and we're going to sew them on either side. So I'm just going to place those right sides together and head on over to the sewing machine. So of course I didn't see my mistake until I had sewn it all together and I got one of my units flipped around, so those blocks are wrong. So I'll rip that out and fix it. And I got it all fixed. And did anybody figure out what my little wonky block is? Because I see googly eyes in one of them. Does anybody else see a googly eyed face? Because I see it and I cannot unsee it. It's that block right there. I just can't unsee it. But I am not changing it at this point. I'm leaving it. Well, anyways, thank you so much for stopping by, and until next time.